Alright. Welcome to the Professor's Lab Podcast, the podcast where we talk with each other, laugh with each other, and maybe cry with each other. Today we're doing my Trek essay part 2. Finally getting this out of the way before I go on vacation. It is 10:15 p.m. at night in the evening. I am extremely tired. And, I'm just trying to get this out of the way, upload it before I go to bed. And we're going to wake up and I'm going to, drive to the airport and we're going to go to Scotland for 3 weeks. With my oldest brother, who has not been to Europe in his entire life. So, I hope to finish this essay, reading it and stuff. We're on day 2 and then there's day 3 and then that's it. Part 1, you can probably find it really easily. I didn't do it. I didn't record it that long ago, so you can just look for it. But yeah, hopefully I don't pass out from exhaustion reading this. Should we just jump right into it? Is that all I have to say? I don't know. This is a scheduled upload, so I've been gone for a week by the time you're watching this probably. And so, there won't be another podcast episode next week or anything. Or after that. Wait. Right? Yeah, so in the next 2 weeks, there's not going to be an episode. There will be when I come back, so maybe in like 2.5 weeks from now or something like that, there will be a new episode. Anyway, let's get started. Day 2, Friday. We were awoken at 6 in the morning to the sound of one of the coordinators playing a trumpet really loudly to get us all up as quick as possible, as we had a long day ahead of us. I quickly get out of my sleeping bag, take everything off of me that I used to sleep with, and pack everything back into a bedroll to store into the handcart once we leave in a few hours. I then put on my jacket, gloves, a single beanie, my cowboy hat, and my shoes once I'm out of the tent. I make my way to the carnival area to get hot chocolate, then realize I forgot my bucket. So I go back to get it since it has my metal cup in it, then go on my merry way. I set my bucket down and sat on it, drinking my hot chocolate as a replacement for coffee because our church doesn't believe in hot drinks that aren't hot chocolate. After a few minutes, I see a girl from my seminary class walking with a small group of people. I shaved my face a day before the trek was happening so I could go to school, have everyone see how it would all look, hear their opinions, and then regret going through with my decision of shaving for trek. The people at school weren't the only people that got to see my face revealed beforehand. They weren't the only people that got to see my face revealed beforehand, because I also had to go to seminary in the morning before school every morning. Abby was one of those people that already knew about me shaving, so as she was walking by she said hi, but here's the kicker. She followed up by saying, "You look like a depressed cowboy." Now this could be due to me wearing a beanie under my cowboy hat, or it's because I had massive eye bags I didn't know about because nobody brought a mirror to take a moment to practice some morning beauty school. Who knows? I need some water, hang on. Comment down below if you want a ASMR dedicated to deep drinking. Later on, it was time for families to pick up breakfast. Since me, Parker, and Joaquin were the only ones up and walking around the carnival area, we picked up the food and milk and walked back to our camp. We run into our pa on the dirt, so he turns around and walks with us. We set everything down on our table. Ma and Pa begin heating up the stove, and we all begin cleaning out our tents a little more. I don't remember what we ended up eating that morning, but it was probably something really boring. But so was that whole morning in general. Once we ate and had our tents packed up, I was looking for something to do while we all waited for it to be 9 a.m. so we could get everything in our carts and continue trekking for the day. Earlier, I saw some kids climbing a giant rock nearby, further into the grassy wilderness, so I wanted to see if I could pass some time by climbing it myself. I realized I shouldn't go alone, but I noticed my brother Nathan walking around with nothing to do. So I went up and asked him if he wanted to go climb the big rock with me. He said sure, and we started walking through the tall grass that led to the bottom of the big rock. We were searching for a proper slope that could allow us to climb up to the top, but the formation was in such a weird shape that it seemed as if you had to be some sort of professional rock climber to accomplish the task. Nathan asked me if our parents gave the okay to let us go on this journey, and I said I never asked them. He was surprised to hear me say this and told me that we shouldn't leave the camp without permission, and I assured him that as long as we were being safe, then we should be fine. We hiked around the other side of the rock and found an opening where we could go inside the formation. We went inside and I told Nathan to stand in a safe place while I tried to see if I could climb up through an inner slope inside the rock that seemed a little steep. I positioned myself on top of a smaller rock that was to the side. Then I jumped and gripped myself onto the slope with my torso and my hiking gloves. This slightly startled Nathan as he was watching from behind, and I was barely able to hang on with just the grip of my apparel alone. I quickly managed to climb up and stand on top of the slope. The only other obstacle in the way was one more steep slope that led to the top of the rock formation. This one in particular was a little more tall and a good 120-degree angle from where I was standing. Since I couldn't reuse my tactic from before and jump onto the side in order to get a good grip with my gloves, I decided to hop down and tell Nathan that we should just head back to camp before they leave without us. This was another small drop in the bucket of things not going my way during this fun trek experience. I wasn't able to climb a simple rock, and so I was slowly becoming more disappointed with going on trek. Once it was time to leave, me and Parker got in front of the cart once again to pull it for the first quarter of the trek for the day. This time, instead of our family being in the back, we were closer to the middle of all the other families with their carts. So we had to make sure we were at a steady pace the whole way without slowing down the people behind us. Right before we moved onto the trail, everyone stopped to put on sunscreen and make sure everyone had water. So me and Parker take our jackets off to make sure we don't get tanner than we already are. I asked him if I was already sunburned since yesterday, and he pointed out that the back of my neck was a little dark. So I got my answer for that. My next concern is if I started getting acne from all the dirt we've gotten on us, but luckily, all I had on my face was a cut above my lip from shaving wrong. Since my charisma is at the lowest it's been since I was 14, I wanted to at least make sure I was only walking around with a smooth, girly face rather than it being accompanied by me having a bunch of acne as well. If I have to be tortured by going on another day of hiking and pushing a handcart, then I at least want to look fabulous in the pictures while doing it. I don't exactly remember much from this part of the trek, but it was very similar to what we already experienced prior. It started with us moving through tall grass, then it got rocky. There were some bees, more hills, a few streams, and it got a little more hot. But we got our first resting stop for the day, and this time it was the side of a farm. We positioned our handcarts next to everyone else's, then we dispersed for a few minutes and rest by some big rocks. I went by myself to lay on top of a boulder in the sun. Some kids nearby asked me if I was sunbathing, and I said, yeah. But I was laying on my stomach, so the only thing that would be bathing in the sun is the back of my neck. I was exhausted. The better part of 2 whole days of hiking through a desert landscape while pushing a handcart in over with. My energy on the second day was completely drained at this point, and it was only 11:30 a.m. The sharpness of the boulder I was laying on was digging into my fragile skin on the bottom of my forearm, but it felt more relaxing than the feeling of having to hike, so I wasn't too bothered by it. My relaxation seemed to have only lasted for 5 minutes as all the young men were called back over to the side of the dirt road. They said we were going to go on a short journey as all the young women were going to face their own trial. I walked over and sat on the side of the big rock next to where we were meeting up before we left. I see everyone walking around and talking with each other as if they were all best friends. I felt as if I was left out, as usual. I had a whole family behind my back that aided me on this journey, and yet I didn't have a long-lasting connection with them. Every other family seemed inseparable towards each other. I knew I was going to be miserable during this trek experience, but I had no idea that I would struggle this hard to form a connection with other people. Maybe my family and I were very unfortunate to end up being together. The only person in my family that seemed to enjoy herself, or so she tells us, is Adrian. Everyone else seems to be treating this whole experience like it's paid labor, but our only payment is blessings from heaven. We didn't seem to feel blessed yet. We were still stuck in the trial phase. We're made to go through trials in order to receive enlightenment and learn from our struggles. By this point, it's not very likely we've learned anything yet. Trek has just been a big chore. As we all started walking along the dirt road away from the farm, we got it just far enough to where if we shouted towards the direction of the young women, they would not hear us. The young men leaders stand on top of a rocky ledge on the side of the dirt road to speak over us. They told us to open our journals and turn to the hymns section so we could sing before we head off on our journey. I lost my journal, so I turned to the person next to me and read off of theirs. After the hymn, they explained to us that we are now part of the Mormon battalion. During the original trek of our ancestors, some of the young men had to go off and fight in the battalion and be apart from their families for a few months so they could go fight the natives. Our mission is to reenact this. The leaders tell us that the young women are going to do their own thing while we're going to hike over a mountain for a little while. What the young women are going to face may be the most difficult thing they'll ever do. And when I heard those words, the most difficult thing they'll ever do, I was a little intrigued. What are they going to do? Pretend that a sack of corn is an infant and bury it in the ground as if it was sick? Get stones thrown at each other to leave marks and bruises on their backs as if they were caught stealing from a merchant? Or maybe climb the rocky side of a mountain without wires? We headed out on our short hike as the leaders told us to be quiet, make no noise for the entire hike, do not yell and laugh at the young women as we hike over and see them in the distance. This is a growing experience for them. The only words that we want to hear from your mouths are words of encouragement. We spent 5 to 10 minutes hiking up and around a small mountain that was covered in stones, scat, and jumping cholla cacti. I tried my best to keep up with my average size legs next to everyone around me that were 6 feet tall. The mountain was so steep that my legs were starting to get overworked almost immediately. It's mountains like these that make me hate hiking in the wilderness. All of this in absolute silence. Someone would trip and no one would say a word, just lift them up and keep them moving with the rest of the group. The people that were a little more hefty and slow would stay way in the back so they could move at a smoother pace. The trail was covered in animal feces that we all tried our best not to step in.
Okay, so what is it you want to take on the plane with you besides your jacket and your phone? Do you want a bag?
Bag? What kind of bag?
Like I brought an orange backpack. Cause I got the neck cushies. So I got this orange backpack that I could we could combine stuff in it.
Can I not use the camera bag?
Do you want to?
Do I not have a choice?
No, you have a choice.
I assumed I would just use the camera bag for multiple things.
Okay, does it have room for what you need for the airplane?
What do I need for the airplane?
Well, once we get in the airport, you're going to want to get a drink and carry your neck cushy. And maybe your phone and your sunglasses or something. Or we could buy you sunglasses.
That doesn't sound that bad.
Okay. Is there anything you want? Like, do you have headphones you can bring so that you can listen to a movie on the plane?
Oh, yeah. Remind me to bring those.
I'm reminding you now. And I've got extra batteries. So if you have like a phone charger or I've got extra cables and batteries. Because on the flight to Edinburgh, we're going to be tired and we should sleep. So this is a neck cushy that has a hood, so that you can. It's supposed to be able to cover your eyes, so you can connect it right here, and then your head doesn't fall down. Hopefully. And then this can go over your eyes if you want, or I have the. It just doesn't look like it goes over very well, does it? But that kind of gives you a little bit of privacy to sleep, and then you could put the eye things on if it's the light's in your way, or you don't have to wear this. You could put it back.
Mm-hmm.
Will you use it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I've got your wristbands too.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want the black or the gray one?
Black.
Okay. So that's something like this is going to take. So you want your camera bag then,
In the plane?
right?
No, just traveling. I don't know. I
I'm
didn't.
talking about on the airplane.
Yeah, I didn't know what you were asking me.
Oh, okay. So for the airplane tomorrow,
Mm-hmm. I don't need a bag. I don't know why you're bringing that up.
you're just going to have your phone and
Mm-hmm.
your cushy
Mm-hmm.
and some barf bags.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you want your water bag?
My pouch?
Yeah.
No. We'll have cup holders, right?
Yeah. No, they don't really have cup holders.
I mean, I should just keep it in my lap, so it's fine.
Okay. And then you just have to put in. I'm gonna put these together. I'll put these bark bags together. So if I have a backpack that has all the cushions in it, you could carry that since you're not gonna have it.
What was the last thing I was reading? The trail was covered in animal feces that we all tried our best not to step on, along with prickly pears and jumping cholla. The only things we were accompanied by were the sunlight piercing our skin, someone in front and someone behind you trying to keep a steady pace, the sounds of our footsteps and the sound of the wind. Once we were horizontal to the women, we could see them hiking up a trail that consisted of 5 steep hills, while grouping together and pushing the handcarts all by themselves. We could see all of them struggle from more than 200 feet away as they all pushed the handcarts with all their might. We did not say a word. We stayed silent and kept walking. We finally made it to the top of the mountain and stopped to rest while we waited for everyone else to catch up. The leader started speaking to us and explained that we were going to walk down the hill towards the young women. Alright, hold on. Okay, are we done? Are we done? Can I do this? Upload it and then go to bed, please? Okay. What the frick was I reading? They specifically told us not to help them get up the final hill that we were now standing on top of. All we could do was cheer them on as they got closer to the top. Oh, frick. So we walked down and waited. I was beginning to question how we were a battalion when all we did was hike up the mountain for barely 10 minutes and then meet back with all the young women in barely any time at all. Back in the time period of the real Mormon battalion, the men and women were apart for much longer than 10 minutes. The men had to leave their families and possibly never return to fight the natives, as the women stayed behind and took care of 1 to 20 children all at once. The trials of these women faced were being able to keep everyone warm during the winter, going hunting in order to get enough food, tending to broken limbs and life-threatening illnesses, defending from rabid natives, and burying dead children that would freeze to death overnight. All of this without seeing their brothers or husbands for up to 3 months. When my brother was on a trek during 2014, he and all the other young men couldn't see the women for an entire evening, entire night, and entire morning as they all went off and did side quests with various people to immerse themselves in the real Trek experience. I did not feel like I was in a battalion on this day, and all I learned to do was hike up a mountain for the millionth time and cheer on the young women while they struggled to push a handcart up multiple hills. The whole point was to leave the women alone, separate from all the men, as the whole experience so far was all of us conjoined in our families, helping each other through our Trek journey. This most likely succeeded in humbling the women, but according to history, it wasn't only the women that suffered without having the men around it. Having the men around. It would have been interesting if we had to go out and do something similar to what my brother had to do back in 2014. I was already exhausted anyway, so maybe I shouldn't complain. For the next 15 minutes, we watched all the young women push their handcarts over the top of the final hill. We could not help until they were past a certain point. All of the young men talked about how difficult it was to watch all of them struggle while pushing the handcarts all by themselves. There were about 10 women pushing each handcart on average, but when we were all still together while trekking this whole time, there would only be 4 to 6 people pulling and pushing the handcart on either side. The only difference is the fact that there were only women pushing and that they were going up multiple steep hills before we've had lunch yet. I never felt inclined to help out, as I was still exhausted from the trekking for that day, and from a short hike we just did a few minutes ago. As every one of the 14 carts were pushed over the last hill, dozens of the young men would rush over to the cart and help all the young women push up to where the cart needed to be set so it's out of the way of all the other carts. Some of the women would come up over the hill crying, either because of how proud they feel about what they've accomplished.
Where's that bracelet I bought you that has the beads on it?
I don't know.
Oh, it's right here. There's 2 of them.
I thought you said you already got them.
I got the little wristbands.
What's the difference?
Well, I think the wristbands might be too tiny. But these look more trendy, don't you think?
Oh. I don't. Sure.
Would you rather wear the wristbands or this?
Probably those new.
And then it goes like 3 fingers above the bend. But I don't know if these are going to be tight enough to make that effect. I'll bring them both. I've got new wristbands too.
Okay. Some of the women would come up over the hill crying, either because of how proud they feel about what they've accomplished or because of all the cramps they were getting from pushing for so long. At the start, we could hear all the women in the distance shouting and ready for anything as they were about to begin this task and go over all these hills. At the end of it, they were all exhausted but proud to be in such an empowering position. As we were all standing around, my bishop happened to be walking around looking for me. It took him a moment to realize that I was right next to him. He greets me, tells me that he couldn't recognize me without all my facial hair, and asks me how I'm enjoying myself so far. I obviously have to lie and say I'm doing pretty good. He then explains that he's been texting my mom to update her about what I've been doing this whole time. They were telling each other, as long as we get a smile out of him, then I think it's worth it. And that's what he tells me. I wasn't surprised to learn that he and my mom have been plotting against me to make sure I'd have fun on this Trek journey. In fact, I was used to it. The church tries so hard to get the youth out there and have the time of their lives doing just about anything. My issue is that I don't enjoy being out on an activity that lasts more than a day, especially if it's in the wilderness. But no matter how many times I have to emphasize this to my mom, she still goes through with reassuring me that it will be lots of fun and you will learn a lot. But then, it all just ends up feeling like work with no reward, which perfectly describes what Trek has been so far. Alright, so why the frick? I kept on getting interrupted by like my cat when I was reading this in part 1. And then now I'm being interrupted again, but by my mom over and over again because we're still packing apparently. I thought we were done, but she's still like finding things to put in there, and she's like, we need to take this to this. Why doesn't this ever happen when I'm doing the podcast normally? I am never interrupted. But then I'm reading this thing, and it's going to be like 2 hours long now. Okay? And I'm just constantly interrupted. What's going on? What's going on? Okay, let's finish. What page are we on? Oh, frick. Everyone heads over to where me and all the other young men were at the end of the trail that we went on our Mormon Battalion experience. We positioned our carts in a random order and sat down next to them, waiting for the coordinators to tell us that it's time to continue the hike for the day. My Trek sisters Adrian and Emma make it over to our family's cart and talk about how exhilarating the experience was. We all look around and realize that we haven't seen Rachel in a while. We asked our mom, Pons, and they said they haven't seen her either. But right when it was almost time to leave, Rachel showed up out of nowhere and asked us what happened when she was gone. We explained to her that the youth split up so the women could push their handcarts over the big hill behind us while the men went on a separate hike to go on the opposite side and cheer on all the young women as they got over the hill. Rachel was very disappointed to hear that she missed out on this experience, then explained that her stomach was hurting as we all got to the farm, so she pulled herself out and had a mental breakdown by the porta potties. She was in great pain and started to regret ever coming, and that this was the hardest thing she's ever had to go on. Despite the laughter and love that was coming from our ma, Adrian and Emma, I thought about how crazy it was that someone was able to admit that they weren't enjoying a ward activity like this. Rachel seemed to be the kind of person that wants to always be involved in everything and always takes leadership to set an example for everyone else around her. She literally spoke on the megaphone to thank everyone for coming to Trek at the beginning of the first day before we were officially leaving that day. Hearing about someone like her regret ever coming to this was just unheard of for me. Then suddenly, she assures us that she's still glad to be here with us and that she's ready to finish this day off stronger than ever. Alright, water break. We all very quickly started to continue moving forward to finish off the rest of the trail in order to get to the official resting spot to eat lunch. Oh my gosh, we're almost 30 minutes in already. We moved so quickly that me, my brothers, and Adrian completely abandoned everyone else for a minute. We let some of the families behind us move past as we stopped where we were and waited for the rest of our family to catch up. Then we were on our merry way once more. The families at the front started to slow down a little bit, so we were all starting to move a little slower until eventually we completely stopped. I was starting to struggle as we were pushing our cart. I took this extra stopping period to eat a granola bar from my bag that I wore around my shoulder. I immediately felt energized again. Me feeling fatigued this afternoon was the result of my incompetence that had me not even think about food the whole... Okay, me feeling fatigued this afternoon was the result of my incompetence that had me not even think about food the whole time. All I was worried about the whole time was the amount of water I was consuming. This proves why I'm the thinnest person in my family. The rest of the trail seemed a little more tight compared to all the other trails we've been on. There were a lot more hills, rocks, and water, so it was a little bit more challenging to get through. but there was a good amount of shade while being next to the bottom of a mountain. Our next stop to finally eat lunch was on the side of a hill with porta potties, tall grass, trees for shade, stumps and rocks to sit on. I was beginning to feel completely drained and unmotivated to finish the trail. I just wanted my food and to sit down so I could remain motionless and not talk to my family. For today's lunch, they gave us sandwiches with ham, cheese, and mayo, just like yesterday's lunch. Then as for dessert, the coordinators passed out apple pies for all the families. Everyone was really excited and grateful for this offering, but I do not like any kind of pie except for Oreo pie, so I was not interested in the slightest. While we were eating, my family decided to play two truths and a lie in order to pass the time. As I was waiting for it to be my turn, I was trying to think of a couple truths and one lie I could give to everyone. I was cycling through different things I have or had in my life, like cats, my two brothers, vacations I've been on, my guitar-shaped pool, etc. So I thought of what I wanted to say, then it was time to go and finish the rest of the trail. Amazing. I didn't even want to speak to them anyway. Are you serious right now, Bo? I'm so thirsty. I'm gonna get a kidney stone. I think I have diabetes. I have reason to believe I might have diabetes. Type 2 diabetes. Okay. I've just been drinking so much water and I've been peeing so much in just such a short amount of time. We continued our journey for the day as the grass got taller and the amount of streams grew. Near the end of the trail, we had to go through several different streams that went 1 to 2 feet into the ground. A lot of people's carts would get stuck, so they would have to get behind the cart and push it upwards with all their might in order to get back on track. With the massive loss of energy throughout the day, this few seconds of pushing the cart and out from the stream several times over was the most difficult task to accomplish that entire day. Probably since I wasn't with the young women earlier that day, I have no idea where my family would have been without me if I'm being honest. By the looks of it, I was one of the oldest and one of the strongest. I always made sure I was helping to move the cart in some way, even when I was feeling as fatigued as I was that day. This wasn't just my trial, it was everyone else's, so it only seemed right to push myself to my absolute limit for the sake of my family. It was a little past 4 p.m., and our final destination for the day was surrounded by trees and more tall grass. This little area seemed a lot more ideal to have tents and people everywhere as compared to our last camping spot. There was a lot more space to walk around and set up our tents so that we're not shoulder to shoulder with the families around us. My family and I picked a spot that was in front of a giant mossy rock with tall grass scattered all around. We all collect our bedrolls and tents so we can immediately get to work, so we can have a tent to sleep in. We were the most fatigued we've ever been, but we knew that what had to be done. I seemed to be the only one focused on the task, so I laid out my tarp over the grass and attempted to put some weight down on it by throwing the tent on top. The rest of the process required help from my brothers, but they were distracted in talking about things 15 feet away from where I was. I decided to be lazy as well and sit on top of the tarp trying to catch my breath. I started to think about everything we've gone through so far and how the only enjoyment I've had was the carnival and the dancing from last night. Not a single thing that occurred so far on day 2 has been enjoyable. Suddenly, my brooding hours were interrupted by my pa giving all of us letters from our parents back at home. I received 2 letters, one with just writing and the other with writing and pictures of my family and the cats that my mom printed out for me. I wasn't thinking much about life at home that much while brooding, but this made me think about it a whole lot more. I wanted to go home so bad. There were photos of us during Christmas, me and my parents on a hot air balloon, my brothers during birthday parties, and our cats Oliver and Kimber. I realized how much better of a rodeo break I would be having if I just stayed home like everyone else at my school. My legs were sore, my crush was hanging out with someone more manly than me, my Trek family was boring to talk to, and everyone else around us were having infinitely more fun than we will ever feel doing absolutely anything. I wanted to just go home and watch commentary videos of internet drama with Kimber asleep in my lap while I ate chicken-flavored ramen. My brooding was interrupted by someone setting up a tent next to our area of the camp. They asked me if I was going to get back up and finish putting up my tent. I told them that my family stopped to read their letters and never got back to helping me set up the tent. Set the tent. Count how many times I said tent. How many times have I said tent? Okay, I can't stop saying tent. They told me to drag them back into helping, so I did. And so we were back on track to setting up our tent. Once we were done setting up, I was finally able to take off my shoes and relax. It felt very good to lay on something soft for the first time in over 10 hours. I could finally forget about being a responsible older brother and just lose connection with the reality for a few minutes. As me and my brother's relaxation was over, the coordinators announced that it was time to open up the carnival again. I was very surprised.
Okay, this is the bag that has all the neck cushions in it. Where are the other puke bags? I got some in my purse, but I wanted to grab a couple more. Can never have too many. So this is the bag that you'll have to carry for us, because everyone can have a carry-on bag. And then we probably don't need it on the first flight because it has the neck cushies and then the eye things. And then what do I put in here? Oh, it has our British money. But we'll take this on the plane. Okay, go on.
Oh my gosh. I was getting very comfortable on that bed. I thought I was going to be there for a while. Where are we? I was very surprised to hear that not only did we have a carnival on the first day. I'm not close enough, hold on. But they also have one all the way out here on day 2. I immediately got back up and started walking over to where everyone else was walking to. The distance between the camp and the carnival was much closer as compared to the last campsite. The trail led through an empty stream with only sand left behind, which had people's tents in it so they could sleep where there could potentially be water flowing through and wash them all away overnight. Once I got to the carnival, I saw the exact same thing I saw last time. People sawing a log in half, tug of war, food, trading posts, hatchet throwing, bull whips, people walking with stilts, the large chessboard, and all my friends split up into different groups. I regrouped with all the friends I could find, but that didn't last very long as I was still feeling antisocial. I had the devious idea of trying to find something reflective so I can see my face, as I have not seen it at all since I left the house on day 1. I saw a line of cars parked next to the carnival on a dirt road, so I tried to not look too suspicious and snuck around to get a good peek at one of the car windows so I could get an official face reveal of myself for the first time in 2 days. Due to the amount of dirt and sunlight we've all gotten, I wanted to know if I still looked overtly feminine after all this time. Once I saw my reflection on a random car window, I was immediately disappointed in seeing that I looked exactly the same as when I left the house. I took my cowboy hat off to see if I at least looked attractive with my hair down in my face, but the results weren't too different. The first carnival activity I wanted to play again was the bull whips. I walked over to the owner of all the whips so I could be the next person to try it out. I noticed that he had a missionary name tag pinned onto his outfit. I never would have thought that actual missionaries would want to go on trek with all the youth. Like, haven't they put themselves in enough torment by going on a mission in the first place? Why would you want to go on a youth trek on top of being in an unfamiliar environment for 6 to 18 months? He showed me to He showed me how to use the whip, as he didn't know I'd already used one during the last time we had a carnival just yesterday. I walked out into the tall grass and began showing all these children how a real man uses a whip. I very quickly got the hang of using the bullwhip again and began making cracking noises left and right over and over. The missionary was very impressed with my experience, so after about 5 minutes, he had me give the whip to the next person in line. The next and only other activity I wanted to try again was hatchet throwing. Due to my minimal experience prior to Trek, I wanted to try everything in my power to get good at hatchet throwing to focus my mind on something other than my social life. The owner of the hatchets would only let us throw 2 hatchets before we had to stop and go to the back of the line. I would walk up to one of the 3 lines that led to one of the 3 targets, wait my turn after several people take the hatchets, make sure my stance was correct before throwing, throw the hatchets at the target, and then have them bounce off and fall to the ground. Either they'd bounce off, or I would completely miss by throwing the hatchets over the target, so they would get lost in the tall grass way out behind the border of the carnival. I'd then have to go in and retrieve the rogue hatchets so the next person could have a chance at throwing them. I repeated this dozens of times for the next hour from 5 to about 6 p.m. I'm extremely patient and persistent, if not anything else. The trick with throwing hatchets was to throw them more with your wrists rather than with your arms. I truly understand to truly understand what that meant, I needed to go through the process of trial and error. I had to try different distances where I needed to stand if I wanted to be in the right place with the right throwing power so that the hatchet would actually stick into the target rather than bounce off. As time went on, more people would join in on this activity while others would leave. Those people that would come in were automatically better than me, and I never understood why. I had no idea what I was doing wrong. What if someone broke into my house and all I had to throw at them was a couple of hatchets next to me? I would need to know how to properly throw them at the burglar so I'm not the only one that gets hit with something. After 10 to 20 minutes of this trial and error, I finally stuck a single hatchet into the target. The bishop and a couple other parents of a family in my ward saw me finally accomplish this task from across the other side of the activity area. So they cheered me on and told me, "Great job." I did feel really proud of myself, but this pride was a little suppressed by the recurring feeling of disappointment. The whole point of going to the carnival and throwing hatchets is to have fun while messing up and learning how to throw it properly, but I wasn't having fun yet. Even after finally sticking my first hatchet into the target, I continued my venture in mastering the hatchet throwing activity as more people came and went for the remainder of another 40 minutes. I utilized my patience, persistence, and dedication to master something I've barely ever done before. For the last 15 minutes, I was finally able to hit the target almost every time I threw one of the hatchets. Towards the end of everyone's enjoyment at the carnival, people just stopped showing up to the hatchet throwing area, and so I had the hatchets and targets all to myself. It was only then where I started having fun while experiencing the satisfaction of mastering a once non-existent skill within myself. What was next? Knife throwing? Because I'm ready for it. More water. I live in a desert. Alright. We were called over to where all the food was so we could eat dinner. They gave us bread, mashed potatoes, vegetable soup, and a spork to eat it all with. I got my food and sat on my bucket away from everyone else. With nobody but food to distract myself with, I began to get extremely homesick once more. I ate my food for the sake of having energy throughout the rest of the night. It did not taste good, and neither did the feeling of being sat alone with no sight of my family anywhere. Being alone seemed to be the thing I did best. Being around people and having friends just exponentially increases the chance of me feeling disappointed. Being disappointed about something a friend does without the consideration of my existence in their thought process is something I've had to face this entire trek. If I have to be hurt this bad over something a friend does, then maybe it's best to not have friends at all. My thought process was then interrupted as Joanna's friend, Trevlin, showed up out of nowhere and sat next to me. We rode in the car together as Aiden's mom dropped us off at the start of the trail on day 1, but we were never really friends before. She asked me how I was doing, and I of course replied with, "Fine." To make up a conversation, we started talking about the food. Trevlin said that it looked really good, but I said it was alright, and that there could definitely be worse things to eat out here. Oh my gosh, my throat. We then started talking about school and all the classes we wanted to take for next year. I mentioned how I've been taking my second year of Spanish and photography classes, but I don't really want to go for a third year with either of them. I don't remember in the slightest what Trevlin replied with. In fact, I did so much talking that anything she had to say was totally thrown over my head the moment it came out of her mouth. I tend to always ramble on about what's on my mind when I'm nervous because I didn't expect anyone to walk up to me while I was sitting alone by a tire with a makeshift light pole sticking out of it. I never got the chance to tell her this, but I really appreciated that small action to go out of her way and talk with me while we ate dinner. My mouth is getting so dry so quickly. As it continued to get darker, it was time for us to go further out into the grass and listen to more stories of the ancestors that some of the adults are descended from. But this time, we had to go out with only a few families at a time instead of half of the entire members of Trek. As me and my family were able to go, we were greeted with about half a dozen different people scattered around the grassy area, away from the carnival area, and further into the wilderness. They were holding lanterns that allowed us to see them from far away, and at this point, they were telling their story to other families that went before us, so we had to wait for them to be done before we could go on ahead. The first person we had to listen to was the missionary that let me use the bullwhip earlier that evening. He greeted us and explained what we were about to get into. As a spiritual thought, he asked us what can bring us closer together with God. I had an answer in my head, and so he saw how hard I was thinking, then called on me to share my thoughts about that question. I explained how we're all having to experience one big trial, and that's the trek itself. With all of us having a common goal, we shall grow in an everlasting bond that can strengthen all of us on this journey and grow our faith with our Heavenly Father. I know this is ironic, but it's not about what I need to hear, it's about what everyone else needs to, or what everyone else should hear from me so that they don't get the suspicion that I feel as if this is all a waste of time. Do I mean what I said? Yes, but it's just I don't feel like I bonded with my family in the slightest. I feel like we have a common goal and that we're all going to face them alone without any consideration for how our actions will affect our brother and sister next to us. We're all not exactly here to prove anything. We were all either forced to come here or pressured by everyone in our church since this was going to be such a huge event. We were finally able to move up and listen to the first story from someone that I recognized from my ward. I really don't want to butcher anyone's story, but they were about what you'd expect. The first story was something about a family moving through the cold while it's snowing in Wyoming. Everyone keeps dying in their sleep, but then it's all good because they got to their destination in the end. Another story was about the daughter or granddaughter of a family that was doing stuff in the yard of their property, but then a handsome young man walks up and starts talking to her. She describes him as having amazing hair and eyes as they would talk each other's ears off until one of the parents caught them talking and then told the young man to leave and never come back. But then he comes back anyway, so he and the daughter continue talking. The young man explains that he comes from the Mormon church and says that she should join it. They depart for the day as she goes and thinks about what he said. She tells her family that she wanted to be baptized in the church, and obviously they were not pleased to hear this. But she goes off and gets baptized anyway. Her and the young man get married, have several kids. They go on the Mormon trail to escape persecution from all of the eastern states. And they lived happily ever after. Another story was very similar to the story we heard yesterday outside the cave, where a woman's father didn't want them to leave England and worship a church she's not fond of. but she leaves on a ship anyway and joins the church, then goes on the Mormon trail to also escape persecution from the people of the eastern states. There were a few more stories, but I don't remember anything from them. These stories showed examples of loss and the strength of their ancestors' faith. There were a few tears shed throughout these stories from the people around me, but with me, however, if I can handle watching movies that are rated R, then I was fine with sitting through these stories and showing no reaction. We all head back to where we left our buckets and were greeted by everyone gathered in front of a white sheet with a projection of someone's Windows OS background on their computer. By the looks of it, we were about to watch a video of some sort. I sat where I left my bucket and tried to toughen through being out in the cold by myself. They were serving hot chocolate again, so I got up to get myself a cup in order to warm up. I sat alone on my bucket for a few minutes until the pa of another family that hiked in front of us called me over to sit in the warmth provided from the heat lamp scattered around the carnival area. This was Brother Hostetler from my ward. I recently did priest ministering at his house a couple weeks before leaving for Trek, so we've had the opportunity to talk and learn more about each other's real families, since it's only me and my mom that actually go to church anymore, since both of my brothers graduated high school. I sat right next to Brother Hostetler and commented on how cold it's gotten. He mentioned that it's too cold to be sitting alone, so he wanted me to feel included while we watched the slideshow that the Trek photographers prepared for us. Once the slideshow started, it immediately kicked off showing some of the first best pictures from day one, while a popular song from the 2010s played in the background. Yes, it was Can't Stop the Feeling by Justin Timberlake. We saw pictures of my sister Rachel talking to the megaphone, the dog that was always running around, families posing for photos, everyone pulling their handcarts in great agony, us sitting down, eating lunch, some zoom-in photos of people walking around without them knowing they were being photographed, and then all of us dancing. There were several photos that I could see myself in, and even one where they got a close-up photo of me eating a salty cookie that was given out on day one as we were eating lunch. At first, I could barely recognize myself without all the facial hair. I would look at the photo, think, wow, that's a fabulous woman wearing pants, only to find out that it was literally me. I would know it was me because I could clearly see my long blonde hair under my brown cowboy hat, my blue shirt, and my dark pants. None of the photos were super flattering, as they were all taken without my knowledge, but even if I did pose for them, there is no existing angle that would make my face any more handsome, with the femboy arc being visible to the naked eye. But I took it for what it was and decided that the photos were all right. As other people's photos would pop up, there would always be a big crowd of people screaming and shouting that person's name right as their picture was on the projector. Some of those photos were genuinely good and had a well thought out composition, and some of them were even posed in front of the sunset on top of a mountain. I began to think about how I could have asked the photographers to take photos of me posing in front of something so I could have a memorable photo. Overall, the slideshow was pretty entertaining and serves as a good highlight of that entire day. Now it was finally time to dance one last time. I've been waiting for this all day. It started out with "We Like to Party" remix again, so I just stood aside and watched everyone else dance like last time. But once the song was over, it was time for the line dancing, and this time we were skipping the dance with the 2 circles of people and going straight to the main course. So we all got into a random line of people, made sure the ratio of boys and girls were equal, and the band got their instruments. This time, I got partnered with someone I've never seen before that seemed just about the same age as my last partner that I see every morning in seminary. She was very short and had the most determined and competitive look I've ever seen on someone's face. She was down and ready to rumble, and nobody could stop her. With all the practice we got last night, we both were very skilled at doing the dance routine already. We cooperated with such elegance that no man would have ever seen before. At one point, the line even shortened enough for us to link hands and skip down to the other end and come back and link elbows and swing with everyone else. Then ended off with joining, making a bridge for everyone to go under, then repeat. This was officially the most fun I've had throughout the entirety of the 2 days we've been stranded out here. All of the disappointment, aching joints, cold temperatures, and boring food was finally leaving my memory for once. Dancing is something I've always done to make myself happy, but with my coming of age, I've seemed to have forgotten that. With the end of the line dancing came one last song. I was exhausted and ready to head back to camp, but I realized that this was going to be our last chance to dance with each other before we went home in the afternoon tomorrow, so I decided that I had to pull one last boogie for everyone. This last song was one I've never heard before, but everyone else around me found it all too familiar. I followed everyone's lead and danced along to the beat. The amount of sweat I was about to produce for this 3-minute song was something I was not prepared for. This dance is hard to describe, but it involved a lot of 90-degree rotation, sturdy moves, and horizontal shuffling. This was my chance to show off my true potential. Come to think of it, I think this dancing was like the electric slide or something. I learned how to do the electric slide recently, and it was not as advanced as what I'm describing here in this essay, but it's kind of similar. It's like advanced electric slide. It's like power line 100-volt electric slide, you know? I had to dance for a duration I've never persevered through before. I was about ready to pass out halfway through, but I kept going and going and going. By the end of it, I was drenched in sweat, more than I could comprehend, as I was wearing a jacket, long johns, a beanie, and gloves. We said a closing prayer, picked up our buckets, and began walking back to the camp. I was very eager to huddle up in my sleeping bag and fall asleep, so I ended up being the first one back to my family's area of the camp. I sat on my bucket next to one of the tents so I could take off my extra layers for a few minutes. This was when I realized how much sweat was built up on my scalp, my hands, and torso. I had so much sweat on me that I could probably wash my hands with it. I was surprised I never passed out from dehydration, as I most likely didn't go without drinking water for 30 to 60 minutes while dancing the whole time. Due to me having my parents' genes that cause us to easily develop kidney stones over the smallest reasons within our diet, I've needed to be really careful with how long I go without drinking water on a regular basis. I've had a kidney stone once when I was 13 during the pandemic, as I was drinking nothing but Diet Coke, so my lack of proper hydration caused me to get a 3mm stone that stayed inside my ureter for a few months at least. Anyway, me being super sweaty and possibly dehydrated after dancing for so long kind of scared me, so I immediately got out my water and downed a few sips before finally going to bed. But as my family came back to the camp, our pa told us that we were just going to have our family time devotional in the morning due to how exhausted everyone is. Another nail in the Larson family's coffin of enthusiasm. Alright, we're about to start day 3. How many more pages? Oh, you don't see that. Okay. 22 out of 27. Pretty much. We're almost done. Oh my gosh. We got about 5.5 pages left. This is the shortest part because it's the end. Day 3, Saturday. Me and my brothers could not sleep the entire night, as a tent next to our area had one of the adults snoring in it the entire night. Any sleep we got was gifted to us by the heavens as a reward for our perseverance throughout the entire day on Friday. We were once again awoken by the track coordinator's trumpet, and I once again get up before anyone else to put everything back on my bedroll so it's out of everyone's way before we start cleaning up their side of the tent while I'm gone. Since we were going home today, I didn't put much effort into rolling everything up this time. I put my shoes, jacket, beanie, hat, and gloves. I put on my shoes, jacket, before heading out to look around the camp and see if the chefs are making food. I walk over to the carnival area and see them all cooking. I asked one of the chefs when the food would be ready, and they said it would most likely be ready in 30 to 45 minutes. I walk back and see my ma and pa setting up for breakfast. I told them when food would be ready, but then they told me that we were cooking our own food this morning. Then why was everyone over there cooking? I must have been in the midst of a fever dream or something. But what me and my family had to cook for breakfast was an egg burrito. So we all got the ingredients out, decided what we wanted, opened up a plastic bag for each of us, poured egg yolk inside until the bag had a third of it filled up, sprinkled our little ingredients, wrote our names on the outside of the bag with a Sharpie, and then submerged them all into a pot of boiling water for the next 10 minutes. As the burritos were cooking, it was time to have our family time and share the gospel with each other since we didn't do so last night. As the sneaky monkey that I am, I noticed that the big rock attached to the front of the hill we were camped in had a depression created from all the rainfall that was in the shape of a flat bowl. So I got my bucket, stepped on top of it, and jumped onto the top of the rock to lay on it while I listened to my family talk and waited for our burritos to be done boiling. I don't remember what my pa was talking about in this devotion, but that's probably due to me being a little bit tired as I was still recovering from all the hiking and dancing we've done the past 2 days. Once the food was finished, we poured all the boiling essence of the eggs, cheese, lettuce, and meat onto a tortilla so we could roll it up and eat it like an actual burrito. It was actually very good and probably the best breakfast we've had. The rest of that morning was a bit of a blur, but after breakfast and our family time, we were tasked with taking down all of our tents so we could pack and load up our carts one last time. Today was the final day of Trek 2023, and so I was going to give it my all until we got to the end. 5 more miles and 4 more hours to get to our final destination from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. We all got lined up on the trail with our families and handcarts so we could gather up and take one last group photo of all 190 of us before leaving. One of the Trek photographers took out all 3 of his camera drones and started flying them from the ground and then all the way above the mountains to get a cool shot of the crowd at eye level and then flying upwards to see everyone from 400 feet in the air. We then sang the hymn, Carry On, again to continue the repetition of us carrying on throughout our journey. And finally, we said a prayer to bless us for the rest of our morning while we hiked on the trail. So with that, we were finally ready to leave the campsite and continue our journey through cloudy skies, slight wind, and 60-degree temperatures. Things were finally seeming to look promising for all of us. The trail was more tall grass, a little bit of streams, a lot of trees, a lot of hills, a lot of rocks in the way, and especially a lot of horse scat that we had to avoid. We were quickly spread out from all the families that the trail, as the trail proved to be very smooth and not as curvy in the beginning. Our first stop was met after 60 to 90 minutes so we could have snacks and talk to our families. My family and I found our own spot behind some trees and out into more tall grass away from the trail. My parents gave us oranges and fruit snacks as we talked about everything we did during our 3 days of trek. It was a wholesome conversation as we probably weren't going to have any more chances to talk with each other after today. Our cool fact for the day was that all the families that had to move from the eastern states to the western states in the 1800s during the actual pioneer trek had to walk for over 100 days to get to their destination. And that was my entire junior year so far. That was, so that was very interesting to think about. I don't remember much from the rest of the conversation we had, but Rachel talked more about her perspective and what she was doing while all the young women were doing the pole up the 5 hills on day 2. So to close off, we all shared our most difficult moments and favorite moments of trek. Most difficult moment had to be shared through lies, so I told everyone that I was definitely just going through all the... My most difficult moment had to be shared through lies, so I told everyone that it was definitely just going through all the trails without stopping for long periods of time, and my favorite moments were line dancing. If you've been paying attention to my story, then you would know that the most difficult part of the trek was finding out that my crush was talking to someone infinitely more manly and infinitely more talented than me. I suck at competing, so I didn't even have the courage to try and win her back. So I just had to let it happen. If you were standing in front of two guys where one had a full beard covering his ape face, and the other with a clean-shaven baby face that makes them look like a woman with their abnormally red lips, freakishly long multicolored hair, and notably average height at 5'9", then who are you going to choose? Chloe was a handout from the beginning, and I wanted to keep it that way. I didn't want to fight over my potential wifey, because if she wanted to marry me, then she would be so clingy to every other guy around her. I don't want to put effort into something that I know is a losing battle. Eli can play piano extremely well, has a higher GPA. Hold on, I spelled his name wrong, apparently. Eli can play piano extremely well, has a higher GPA, participates in all the church events, and has more testosterone than everyone in the ward combined. He's literally everything a church girl could ever want in a literal husband. They might as well have just gotten married during the trek because it's a clear match between them. So that's why this mental rejection was the worst part for me. There is no other woman that I know is quite like Chloe, but I have no choice but to yield this temporary offering. The rest of the trail was literally us going back through the trail we went on yesterday afternoon so we could go on a different road that led to a giant rock formation that could allow for our parents to pick us up on a dirt road that went right back onto the freeway of Benson, Arizona. The most notable part that's worth mentioning is when we had to go down a steep hill, so me and my family had to go behind the cart and pull the cart upwards as it was rolling down the hill. The hill seemed to have gone on forever. And so I just remember me using my prime technique in order to keep a good grip of the cart's brakes while we slowly let it roll down the hill. I felt as if I was walking like a cowboy whose belt keeps falling off because of how goofy I looked while walking. Soon after, there was a traffic jam, and that gave Joanna's mom the chance to find me so she can be the one to check up on me this time instead of the bishop. I once again lied and said I was doing pretty good. She asked me if this has all been super fun, and I responded with, yeah, for the most part. You could still sense my distaste in the whole experience, but I didn't want my one bad experience to then generalize everyone else's experience, as I might end up telling all the adults that I did not appreciate coming on this trek. It's called a little white lie. A little white lie could never hurt anyone. Another traffic jam soon comes as we're hiking past the barn we stopped at yesterday and going on to another trail that goes up and over the final stretch of the hills that leads into the desert with the giant rock. This time, my bishop takes the time to ask me if I'm excited to finally be done and if I'm proud of the work I put into this journey. I remind him that we weren't technically done yet, and we most likely have another 1 to 2 miles until we have the chance to be proud of ourselves. Yes, I was getting smart with my bishop. We finally make it to the giant rock in the desert, and we are all exhausted. It was getting towards 80 degrees, and with this weather, that was a lot of heat for our frail bodies. We all immediately put our carts down and begin taking apart the handcart so they can be stowed away for the next trek in 4 years from now. I take out my bucket to sit on it and think about everything I've gone through. This really was that one-of-a-kind experience that I could talk to people about for the rest of my life. One problem, I did not feel like this was a positive experience in the slightest. But we don't need to talk about that right now. I look around and I see everyone talking, laughing, and hugging each other in pure excitement over the fact that they were able to make it through this journey without dying. For some, this was the hardest thing they've ever done in their life, and for others, this was just a walk in the park. But in the end, everyone was glad to go on a trek with all the people in the church as if we were all a family. Some people feel as if they came closer to God by facing this one big trial that is trek, while others feel like they've made new best friends as they all struggled together rather than alone. It was time to eat lunch before we all had our parents come pick us up, as the track coordinators said that we've all arrived at our destination in record time, so it's going to take another 45 minutes before our parents are even going to show up. I decided that I wasn't hungry, but then I was told that they were grilling burgers, and I still didn't want to go down and wait in line for that. I continued to sit in silence as the rest of my family went to get food. I began to lay down on a few things that we took out from the handcart, so I didn't have to sit up straight the whole time. The clouds started to move out away from the sun, so I had to move my hat over my eyes so the sunlight didn't cook my vision. I felt as if I was at peace. No more responsibilities to take care of. No more being the big brother. No more hiking. No more Shrek. I laid there for 8 minutes just absorbing this accomplishment. That relaxation was interrupted as the coordinators announced that the youth needed to retrieve their bedrolls as soon as possible, so nobody leaves anything behind. So I stood up and found the pile of bedrolls so I could see if mine remained intact after not tying it together very well. I very quickly found it, and so I picked it up and brought it back to my disassembled handcart. But then they announced that we all had to pick an adult's car to put our stuff in so they could drive it back to the church. I picked up my bedroll one last time and took it over to my ward's van that was able to carry all of our stuff back to the church while we waited for our parents to arrive. Now that I have nothing to lay on in the dirt, I decided to walk around and look for all of my friends before we all officially departed. I started looking for Aiden, but couldn't see him anywhere. I began looking for Joanna, her sister Caitlin, and their foster sister Callie. I found all of them but still couldn't find Aiden, so I gave up. There was still one person I needed to find so I could say goodbye. Chloe. I walked around for a few minutes looking thoroughly in the camp and in the parking spaces. I started walking around the giant rock with tons of other rocks scattered around the dirt. Very quickly, I finally saw Chloe. She was sitting on top of a boulder, talking to Eli. I should have known. I wasn't even going to bother saying anything to her. I walked off further into the rocky path that leads up in and around the giant rock. Turn around one last time and see Chloe glance at me. She most likely seemed confused about why I wasn't coming up to her, but that wasn't my problem anymore. I started climbing up the rock to find myself a nice formation to sit on top of so I could look out over the camp and watch everyone run around below. There were other kids climbing and running around the rock formation, but I just ignored them and remained sitting in the shade next to a tiny cave that eroded on the side of the rock. Eventually I got bored, so I tried finding a way to get on top of the rock to look out even further. I found a way up and I stumbled upon Abby from my seminary class again. We greet each other and then she continues talking to all the kids running around the rock. The view was so satisfying to look at from up top as I could see everyone in the camp, and even the freeway that was more or less half a mile out into the desert from where we were sitting. I sat here for another 5 minutes as I saw my mom's car pull up on the dirt road. It was our white 2007 Nissan Xterra, a very rare breed to see out here in the wild, so I knew it had to be my mom. But I stayed sitting on the rock, waiting for her car to get close enough to where I could jump off and quickly walk over to it. I started to hear my name get called from below by what it sounded like to be the bishop, so I safely scaled all the way down to the ground and run to where my voice was being called from. I don't remember seeing the bishop, so I just went over to my mom's car, said, "Can I help you, ma'am?" and got inside. I was being quirky. There wasn't too much of a fanfare as I got in the car with my mom, but that's the way I like it. We took off and drove onto the freeway to head home. Throughout the whole car ride, me and my mom talked about everything that happened. I noticed that I was suddenly very hungry, so I asked if we could stop at McDonald's before we got to church to pick up my bedroll. This was the first time I could talk to someone about how miserable the trek has been, but the only thing I left out was the part about Chloe. My mom was naturally disappointed to hear that I didn't enjoy my experience. In fact, I gave it a 4 out of 10. It would have been a 3 out of 10 if it wasn't for the line dancing, then a 2 out of 10 if it also wasn't for the carnival. Trek was not something I'd want to do again, especially since all of these negative things happened at such an important time of my life. I wanted to use this experience to meet people I will know for the rest of my life and create more of a connection with Chloe, as the texting thing we've got going on is not very productive. My attempt at trying to make something work has only seemed to make my social life worse. The more I don't win, the more I realize how screwed up my life is. What is it like to win? Why does everyone else around me win like it's nothing? Will I ever be happy? Nothing really significant happened after the trek. It was the usual, what did you do over rodeo break? And then I replied with, I hiked 15 miles through the desert in Benson for 3 days while pushing a handcart with 190 other people. Me and Chloe started talking a lot less as I knew I had no chance at being her priority anymore, as all the youth would step up and share their testimony on their experience throughout the trek. They were always really giddy and excited to talk about it, and they all said it was a 10 out of 10 experience. As I would tell Joanna and her sisters about me thinking it was a 4 out of 10, they acted really confused, as if they in fact have been with me the whole time and seeing me somehow enjoy myself through it all. I enjoyed the carnival and line dancing, but I hate sleeping in the wilderness. I hate the cold. I hate walking for extended periods of time. I hate pushing heavy things, and my family was very boring to be around. Parker was cool, though. Caitlin admitted that there were some flaws in the whole experience, like her family also being kind of boring and not wanting to stick around during lunchtime to get to know each other better, how much walking we had to do. So she gave it an 8 out of 10. Very bold from the Saint. When people at school would hear about me hiking 15 miles, they'd say, wow, that's basically nothing. I don't know why you didn't have fun. And then I'd remind them about the 800-pound handcart we had to push through it all. I later found out that Aiden twisted his ankle due to his feet problems in the middle of day 2. I heard this from my mom later that weekend after we got home. He must have awkwardly stepped on a rock and ended up twisting his ankle to the point where he couldn't continue hiking. He got on the phone with his mom about it. His mom called their doctor, and the doctor said he needs to go home immediately. It was really funny because Aiden started crying about not wanting to go home so soon. He says that his Trek family needed him, but I think we all know he wanted to stay because of Chloe. Aiden has always had feet and ankle problems, so this was inevitable. Oh, we're almost done. 2 more paragraphs. Trek is something you'd have to see for yourself in order to get the full picture, so that's why I wrote this very long essay about it. And plus, it was a very good way to really empty my thoughts regarding the whole situation, with me once again not having fun when going on a youth campout. My neck. Ugh. I like being out in the wilderness, but I hate sleeping in it and having to navigate around a bunch of terrain for more than an hour, which usually lasts up to 10 hours when you go on these hikes. Will I learn to appreciate these camping experiences in the future? Most likely. But as of right now, it's all just a bunch of unfortunate memories. I'd probably have more fun doing all this stuff if it only lasted a day. Right before we left for the trek, we all went out and tested our endurance by going out onto a trail in the desert near where we live and just walked around for 2 hours. That was fun because I was able to talk to everyone around me and have it all be done before I was officially burnt out from socializing for the day. I am cripplingly introverted. If I'm forced to talk to people for more than 2 hours in a day, I shut down and want to spend a whole lot of time by myself, and this relaxation could last for a couple of days if I'm stretched to my limit. But there's some things you have to compromise for and live with. If the perfect life is to stay at home and never leave, then there would be no point in living. I understand that I need to participate in events I was never interested in the first place, so all I need to learn to do is learn to deal with it, seethe, and cope. My way of coping is writing about how much I don't enjoy these things. Would I recommend anyone else to go on a trek for the experience? I honestly don't know. I have sympathy for anyone that had to suffer as much as me while going on this thing, but for the people that genuinely enjoyed it, then good for them. I can't see myself recommending an activity I never enjoyed in the first place. Some people go on campouts like these just for the social aspect, games, and dancing. I say that as if you want to experience those things in particular. Then just go to normal church dances, mutual activities every Tuesday, and take the time to go to someone's house if they're throwing some sort of gated Mormon party over there. The 15 miles of pushing a handcart is 99% not worth it. I think the only reason I'd truly recommend anyone to go on a trek is for the exercise and having the willpower to challenge yourself physically. If you're going on a trek knowing that there's going to be a lot of people to talk to, then maybe it won't matter that you're going to be physically taxed down to your core. I guess this is where Trek 2023 Saga ends. Remember to share with your friends and family, subscribe to the main channel, follow the Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, TikTok, and join the Discord server. I guess that's about it then. Follow all the social media. Bye-bye. I'm going to Scotland now. I'm going to go on the flight tomorrow as I'm recording this. But it was already a week ago as this is uploaded. But, yeah, I guess that's about it. Follow all the social media. It's all just for funsies. Remember that. Bye-bye.